you on another clip talking about DHT may not be fully responsible for hair loss.
Of how Dr. Drew's jacked. I'm sure the audience out there, it's the whole reason why they're tuning in is to find out if he is or isn't. So, you're jacked. All right, Nerd Chat Part 2. We had about a half hour before we started recording. We talked about trucking companies, fatigue and sleep. We talked about why California is effed, DHT, estrogen metabolism, 16-OH1, inhibiting DHT. What else did I miss? I missed 2 in my scribble because I scribbled a lot of this. Astragalus, we talked about that, and I was like, okay, I got to turn the recording on. So got the same crew from last week on. Thanks for joining, guys.
Oh, Dr. Drew is buff. That's another thing.
Oh, Dr. Drew is buff. We did
Very
talk about that. Very important. Let me see here. Dr. Drew. Nope, I don't have him up. I did have him up. I'll have to pull him back up. So Dr. Drew is buff, and I don't know if we want to say that. I was gonna say he's not on TRT, I think is what
no, yeah, that's true. No, he's been very open about no matter how hard I try, to pump him full of shit and get him to be like, Ronnie Coleman in his peak. He's very resistant to any hormonal stuff because he suffered with prostate cancer. By grace God, he's okay. But Kurt was talking about how even though science could lead you in different directions, he just gets super paranoid about it. And I don't blame him. Listen, I'm not going to fault you. And Lord knows, I'm not going to tell Dr. Drew, who's a legit physician, I'm not going to get into arguments about medical things.
Yeah.
And if you've had cancer, right, you're not going to. I'm not going to talk to someone to convince them otherwise.
Here we go. I don't know if this is the best picture, but this is what I found. Of course, some kind of ad. And you, Mike, how do you, you ran his show for a while, and you guys.
I co-hosted LoveLine with Dr. Drew for almost a decade.
Yeah,
but that was I was working at the flagship station of LoveLine. I was on the air at K-Rock in LA. There's K-Rock in New York too, but I was at K-Rock in LA, and that's where it's broadcast out of. So like I was there when he was hosting with Adam, but I was working on the morning show, and I watched like the Corolla stuff happen. Then Corolla retired, and I literally would like burst into the programming director's office. I'd be like, "Dude, I'm your guy. I'm in recovery. I'm a drug addict. I'm an alcoholic. I'm seasoned in radio." And they were auditioning like real celebrities. They had like Joel McHale going in, Olivia Munn, all these people. And finally I broke down and I realized how cheap I work. Then they hired me. That's how I got to know Dr. Drew on a much larger level. But we were colleagues and we worked together, but we're friends. Like Drew's my buddy. I really
cool.
I'm very close to him. So
well, let's check this out. I found a short clip. Maybe this will show some images of how Dr. Drew's jacked. I'm sure the audience out there, it's the whole reason why they're tuning in is to find out if he is or isn't. So,
you're jacked. That was way back then.
Look at the body on him.
Damn.
Those are some arms.
But I was younger. I was bigger still.
Jesus.
I could lift a lot of weight.
Yeah.
That back
Mine has an erection.
I know. I got to be careful. I'm going to the bathroom afterwards.
Something to do for huge dicks. You got a drug for
this thing's all swollen, Dr. Drew.
I mean, I'm straight, but what's with my dick? Every time I look at a picture of you, you a doctor of love.
We'll go back to the image.
You're jacked.
You're
jacked.
That was way back then.
So I got the Dr. Drew jacked. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, he's not stepping on any IFBB stages, but like if you meet him, you're like the first thing most people notice. They're like, "Whoa, like you're way more muscular than I ever could have assumed you would be."
Yeah, it's not common for many docs, especially celebrity docs, to put the time in, right? So
yeah, and he's geeky about it too. Like he will absolutely, whenever we would have guests that were muscular, like if we had like WWE guys on the show, we'd talk way too long about like pumping iron. And people probably listeners are like, "What is idiots talking about?"
Does he do any combat sports like you do, or
no? And I always remind him, I was like, you could lift all you want. I'll break your arm. I'll put you to sleep so quickly.
Well, that was the quick sidebar, but that was like, I knew this was going to happen, but that was like the most humbling moment. Like I was like, all right, I did powerlifting, I did strongman, I did bodybuilding. Like, that's cool. I could punch pretty hard, like, whatever, like grew up more of a street fighter. And now I'm like, so I go to my first jujitsu class, and there's a guy that's like, mind you, I'm almost 250 and I'm in pretty good shape. And guy's 170 pounds I roll with, and it's a 5-minute roll. And it's like, I'm doing okay for 2 minutes. And by okay, I mean, I didn't get choked and I didn't tap yet. Like, so I'm like, I mean, I'm putting a lot of pressure on where the next 3 minutes were absolute hell. Like I was completely, I'm like, and that's when I left was like, okay, I'm glad I have my CPL. Like I can carry my gun because there's no way in hell, like I'm gonna get my ass beat by some of this training. And that was, you know, and I know like Rogan talked about, so I felt better about myself because I heard Joe Rogan saying he got his ass kicked after winning like worlds of Taekwondo, and he went to Jiu-Jitsu and got smoked in the late 90s. And that's why he started doing it. Cause I was like, okay, I need to learn this. I knew that was going to happen. Like I knew, you know, in 2024, everybody knows that because you've heard it, but just getting, you know, completely like couldn't do anything to the guy, even a guy even in a compromised position. And he's totally calm. And then all of a sudden, once I was gassed, next 3 minutes, it was just like, can I just lay on my back and just keep patting the mat every 10 seconds. But I've gotten a little better, but I'm still in the first white belt phase. I'm not as crazy as I was. What do they call it? The spazzy white belt. I'm not as spazzy as a white belt. Yeah, I'm not as spazzy as I
will say this though, in grappling sports, being your size and being muscular and having your size, you don't have to spend decades to become a black belt. Getting to be like a serviceable blue belt would make you'll be in, don't mess with that guy territory pretty quick. Cause once you open the doors of just understanding like when to close distance, when to create distance, and like positions where you can harness leverage as opposed to strength with your size and strength, that will be like really devastating.
I will say the wrestling gear, like I only wrestled for a couple years, but it kicked back on, and some of the higher belts that again still can smoke me, but they're like, I can tell they're like, you're getting better faster because you know where to put pressure and all
absolutely
that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
But it's fun. I mean, who'd ever thought? I'm sitting there saying how fun it is at 42 getting choked and strangled, but it's awesome when like, oh, this guy's about to try to break through the UFC, and he's an MMA fighter, and he's trying, like, you know, he's had 10 fights under his belt, whatever. He's 24 years old doing flips and shit. And he's like, yeah, I'll roll with you, bro. I'm like, yeah, let's do this.
That is actually an overlooked aspect of it, is because look, in striking sports, I was into Muay Thai and boxing way before I got into jiu-jitsu. You can't even fool around with someone who's on the verge of being a professional, let alone a professional, because you're either going to be a waste of their time, or if they actually want to spar with you, like they're going to put you in the hospital.
Yeah.
In jiu-jitsu, you can go the world champion tomorrow and it's kind of full blast. So sure, they're not going to exert all the, their skill on you, but you're sparring and you can go, and that's like a really overlooked benefit, I think, to grappling.
Last thing I'll say about it, then we can move on. But so he let me choke, like get his back. And I'm like, I'm, like I said, decent for a white belt because of the wrestling background at that, for a white belt. Right. So I'm like, all right. But in my head, I'm like, I really didn't get his back because I know he gave it to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like a little depressed as I'm like trying to land it. And then he fought me so well, because that's what made it good for him, is like, well, I'm gonna get this big ass guy on my back and I'm going to work on my defense. Right. Because like, if not, he's just going to toy with me the whole time. And sure enough, like, I don't know, 2 minutes, I'm trying to, sink the choke in, and I start cramping. I'm the one trying to choke you and I'm about to tap right now. So anyways, it's if you haven't done, anyone who's listening, you got to check it out. It's very, very humbling and a lot of fun too. So anyways,
Joe, you're still 250?
About that. Yeah.
What's your height?
Joe's tall. You're tall, dude. What are you, 6'4", 6'3"?
No, yeah, I'm about 6'3". I'm a little.
I only see people on camera. I don't know how tall anyone is.
Yeah, a little shorter.
Met Joe in 21, I think, maybe 22, and I was like, you always see everybody. I'm 5'9", so when I met Joe, I was like, whoa, you're a big dude. So he's being very modest. He's a very big person in general.
I might be 5'7", so he's huge compared to me.
Yeah, I think I forget that sometimes, and then I don't know. I guess I just known people that were pretty tall too. So, but yeah, and it's definitely an experience, that's for sure. But that's why in bodybuilding, it was like, okay, you know, I need to be on stage at, you know, back in the early 2000s when I was really serious about it. I was like, I need to, you know, I got up to 300 pounds one off season, and that was uncomfortable. But at my height, it's, you know, it's not like when Justin was, I don't know, don't quote me on this, maybe 280 or so. It's not the same because he's 4 inches shorter. So he grew a lot more this way, and I still had to fill a lot more of this. So
yeah, your height, it's hard to be real big on stage.
But
I wonder, I'd love to get your guys' take on that. Competing in general nowadays, like the standards have gotten so crazy and so dudes are so big.
I have an open guy now that just turned pro. He's competed like 1 or 2 pro shows, but he'll probably continue to go pretty far. And he's 5'4", and I have him at 270 right now.
Oh my gosh!
I'll email you guys a picture of him later. I don't know if he wants me talking about him on there.
That's monster.
He's very lean at 270 still. So we're only like a month into off season. He's a monster. Oh my God. He's the biggest human I've ever seen in person.
People always think bodybuilders are much taller than what we are because you meet like any of the top Olympians. They're 5'8", 5'9". Derek Lunsford's 5'6" maybe. I met him at the Arnold, and my fiance was just like underwhelmed how tall he was. I was like, he's supposed to be proportioned. It doesn't matter how tall he is. He looks amazing.
It's a visual thing, yeah. That's why those dudes like the Mountain from Game of Thrones, Hathor. Because I used to train at the Golds in Venice, so I was around IFBB pros. I would see these monsters and even amateurs that were just so big, muscle wise. When a guy walks in, he's 6'9" and that big, you're like, what? Your brain doesn't even make sense of it. You're like, I don't even understand what.
Yeah. Well, like Joe, you're friends with Paul. Like that was kind of how I felt when I first met Paul. Like, he's Big Paul for a reason.
Right.
Like you don't realize how big he is until you stand next to, at least someone my height, you stand next to him.
Yeah. No, he definitely towers. It's something. And I had, you know, I coached a lot of football, you know, high school mainly, but there's a couple guys that, you know, made it to the NFL that I worked with, and similar. I was like, I know this is going to be weird. I'm like, can I stand in front of you? I want to like get the feeling of what it'd be like if I was actually trying to get by you or trying to block you. Cause I mainly played offensive line, but there's a defensive end played for the Saints that I worked with. And I was just like I couldn't breathe standing in front of him. Like just my brain was so, like you said, just on overdrive, thinking of what the hell would I do to slow this mountain of a man down? Oh, by the way, he's faster than me too on top of that. So that's great.
You know, football is a good comparison because, you know, they're changing rules in the NFL literally every season. I don't think the guys who invented the game ever anticipated there'd be guys running like 4.340 at 250. And, you know, with bodybuilding, like you see Frank Zane and you see guys, you know, early 80s, even like there was still there was a bit of a you know, a masquerade as far as like health, but there was still some semblance of being, I'm a healthy, muscular, you know, resilient body. Like nowadays, the standards are so high. I wonder, is it even worth most people trying to check that box off?
So, I mean, just from coaching pros at different, you know, at physique and classic and open, I think it's a genetic game clearly for, you know, 90% of it. Like you can nowadays, the difference is there's enough drugs and they're easy enough to find that you could probably outdo your genetics. There's some guys that do very well on the Olympia stage that I'm not going to name any names because they're still better than I am, but they probably don't have the best genetics, but they can push the gear really high. Not the guy you named before, but he's similar build to him. The guy, I would say physique guys tend to be more responsible with their health. Like I have a pro level physique guy that literally blasts 500 milligrams of gear his off season. That's all he uses. And he's got an awesome physique. Right. And I have a guy that competes, another guy in physique that might use a gram and a half going into a show. Another guy in classic, same thing. They're competitors at the pro level that place in shows, but they're not going to the Olympia. So they're still, you know, they're better than most people in the world. And this guy's using about the same, a little over a gram. And then I have some open guys that use 7 grams, 8 grams, bottles of growth hormone. And the difference of the physique guys too, and the class, again, not for all of them, because I do have an open guy that does care a lot about his health. It seems to be directly proportionate to that. Like the smaller the guys, the more concerned with what they're eating, their labs, their blood work, all that stuff that kind of goes with that. And then some of the other guys are like grams and grams and grams of stuff. They just don't care. It's more about not being mediocre, and depth is not a thing.
I think for bodybuilders, like in the classic in physique now, is weight caps make it attainable. So you're at this certain height and weight, and that's going to keep your health in a better check. Is versus if you're 5'9" and 300 pounds, your heart is probably going to go through a lot more than your comparison 5'9" classic. Our cap's 192 at the 187 in NPC, and then I think it's like 190 something at the pro stage. So those are significant difference in body mass. So you can only take so much gear or you'll grow out of your class.
Yep.
So I think that's why a lot of people are really look into those categories more, and why classic has gotten so popular is it seems more attainable. But you're exactly right. Classic is you have to pick the right parents for classic. You have to have the perfect structure as far as clavicles, small waist, and
that's
like
I was always better at. I couldn't be an open.
Yeah, I could not.
I don't know body sport.
Yeah, and I don't know how much was it genetics or training style? But one thing I did realize was, for me, when I dieted down, I did open and classic, but I scored poorly in classic because I mean, I'm sure there's some genetics there too, but the powerlifting, strongman type stuff, like I just had such a thick, like trunk, it just seemed to really pull away from it. So obviously the easy thing is like work on your quad sweep and wider shoulders. But I will say, from switching up my training and doing more of the like jujitsu type things and some more like kettlebell sports conditioning type work with some hypertrophy training, mixed in there, I can tell my waist is seems to be changing. Maybe it's just, my confirmation bias, but it just kind of seemed like that, to where when I kind of adjusted that. But I'm not sure if you guys see that within your clients or athletes, like as far as the waistline. I know breathing's a big thing, and posing obviously and all that. I remember John Jewett was talking a lot about like how hard when he went from nationals to his when he won his pro card, like that was like one of the biggest changes he made was breathing and posing techniques and like how much he could pull it in. But just curious if you guys see that with like training styles and things of that nature also.
I think some is food consumption too. I mean, that open guy I was talking about before, I shit you not, he eats 9,000 calories a day. So when I first started working with him, I honestly couldn't even figure out a diet for him. The numbers seem so absurd. I was like 575 grams of white rice at every meal. Oh, he eats like that. And he was like, I'm still hungry. You're still hungry? How are you hungry? I was like, I just eat a lot of food. Like I would die. Like my stomach would rupture.
Yeah.
So I think why I brought that up is I think that also just causes, it's going to cause distension. And also, I think from a physics point of view, we should have Justin on for this. I would think that you couldn't have a 27-inch waist and be 300 pounds. I think you'd fold in half. Like, I just think everything has to be somewhat in proportion, and you kind of lose it when you go into open. You can't, like Nick Walker can't have he's got as small of a waist as you could physically have at that size. Like, how do you hold that in any smaller?
Right.
Unless you were to literally somehow drink. I'm not recommending it, but maybe if you just drank all your damn calories, maybe you could somehow keep it smaller. But is that even the look they care about? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the physique guys do a lot of work for stomach stuff. They spend a lot of time keeping their waist tiny.
I wonder how much of it carries over to regular folks, like just that want to look, guys like me who just want to look better in the mirror. I get these guys that like they literally are like they flirted with training, but they've never been serious about it, and they want to make a change, and so they start getting really into it. They start getting hardcore about it, and then they say, I feel when I back squat, I train my low back more than and glutes more than I'm training my quads. And then I realized, they sent me a video that they're low bar squatting. And I was like, well, I understand. Like, I don't want to tell you to not train as one. Then you come to like the feeling of like pushing yourself in progressive overload. But, deadlifts and low bar back squatting, is it really even useful for someone who's from an aesthetic standpoint?
No. I mean, guys my height, I can still squat. My dad was a powerlifter and he's shorter than me. I was like designed to squat because I'm short and I have short femurs, but like anyone taller than me, I wouldn't have a squat. There's just no point. Like I can develop my quads doing that, but like a guy your height, you're better off on a hack squat or a leg press. And also, like once you get to a certain strength point, like you worry about your back. Like I put 500 pounds on my back at 50 years old. The first thought in my mind is I'm going to destroy my back.
Right.
I'm not worried about my knees. I'm worried about my lower back going.
I think there's a lot of appeal to like strength training and moving load, but I don't think it always correlates to hypertrophy. I power lifted. I'm short too. I can walk. People are like, what are you doing for your legs? I'm like, I don't know. I walk around. Like I train them less than everything else and they just grow. So I think genetics play a big role in that. And then the taller you are, you have to think of like biomechanics at that point. Where are you going to get the most knee flexion? Probably going to be a hack squat or a leg press, probably not a low bar squat. Get a lot more glutes and hips in a movement like that.
Yeah. And so mechanical tension is a driver of growth. Like you said, that doesn't mean a heavier load equals more mechanical tension, right? So there's a point, it has to be, it's not linear. There's a point where it correlates, but then it flattens out, right? So like if you're pressing the 100-pound dumbbells, that might, if you get 5 or 6 reps, that might be adequate stimulation for mechanical tension to occur. If you go to the 120s, is that going to be, and the mechanical tension is either on or off. It's not like a thermostat. So it's not like going heavier always equals more, right? I think that's where young guys always do that, right? They're always so concerned with the weight they move, and you're like, dude, just worry about the exercise weight, the way you're moving the weight, not so much, right? Like I'm just as strong as I was when I was younger. I just don't move that weight anymore. To me, it's the risk is just not there, and I just know better. It's like I'm not getting anything out of it when I need to be stronger for.
Right. What's the risk reward, right? But then I I'm glad I could bring this up with you, because then I have that internal dialogue about like, well, the health benefits of when I'm not talking about someone stepping on stage, because you're right. I mean, the mechanical tension that you can get with a good leg press, range of motion, and then maybe.
This episode is brought to you by First Detachment. First Detachment is an expert formulated supplement company founded by renowned coach Justin Harris. We've combined science with real-world experience in each product. We are battle tested. Are you?
Range of motion, and then maybe some leg extensions and curls and things like that. Sure. And you're not putting that overall systemic fatigue, and then the safety issue Kurt brought up, which is absolutely true. Once you get strong enough, then now you're talking about, well, let's look at the safety aspect of it, right? But at the same time, if I know I have this woman who's working hard and she's like really putting in the time, she wants to make that difference, the amount of volume that you would have from, say, the leg press and the leg curl, leg extension, versus the overall health benefit, the metabolic benefits that come with learning and taking the time to actually do an ass to calf squat, I do go like, well, there is an upside.
You're totally right. I think in the beginning, like at that stage, like you're talking about, if you're never going to get to like a super advanced level of athletics, then by all means, I think the squat's a fantastic exercise. I think deadlifts I'm sure all 4 of us have done tons of them at one point, right? You have to, and this is also what you see with social media is they'll watch Lunsford or Nick Walker do stuff. And like that, those things are so nuanced. Those don't really apply to new lifters. Like you need to develop, because all the bodybuilders now are against flat benching. They're like, oh, it's so risky. Yeah. When you bench 500 pounds, when you're 14 years old, you're not benching 500 pounds. Right. Learn how to bench press, get to 315 or whatever you're capable of, and then move on to something else. Like that's what we all did. I'm sure we all spent tons of time on that damn flat bench. Right. You get to a point and like, you're either going to keep going with it, or you get to a point in your shoulder, you get older and you're like, my shoulder feels a little weird on this. I'm not going to do it anymore. But like, you have to get there first. You don't just start. You're not like on the Smith, like what new person's on the Smith machine benching at first? You'd laugh at them. You'd be like, if you're a pro bodybuilder, you can do that. If you're not at that level, go on the regular bench.
Well, when I was, training, I'll pull up a picture in a minute of Justin. He might pop in. I know he's got a family thing, but he said send him a link. He might try to pop in, so I'll embarrass him before he comes in. I do think some of it's like genetic ability to like recruit muscle, because I've worked on my shoulders so many different ways, so restrictive, not bad form, good form, blah blah blah, all different kinds of things. And like he would take like the 100-pound dumbbells and half-ass swing them almost, it looked like, and for like lateral raises, and then here's what the result would look like. Like this is this one image of like, as far as his weird health and stuff. And then when we trained, I remember a lot of it. I think it was before, he'll correct me because he's got like a super memory. I don't know if it was Junior USA's. was it Junior USA's or Junior Nationals? I think Junior USA's, I wasn't at that gym anymore. So I think it was Junior Nationals, but he was doing a lot of isolated work for his pecs because his shoulders were so good at recruiting that, he's just benching obscene amount of numbers. I mean, his first powerlifting meet, it was an elite lifter, like elite level lifter. But the shoulders were recruiting so much. He was trying to bring his chest up, I guess is my point. So he had to like really isolate and kind of adjust it based on genetics and how they respond, where I think a lot of young guys, and that was when he was, I'm trying to remember how old he was. He would have been 24 because I think I was like 21. But a lot of young guys, like, what would they do? They're like, oh, I got huge biceps, whatever they're great at recruiting, and they're just going to keep training it and training it and training it. And, then all of a sudden they want to go compete and everything's so lopsided where, I think it's like, that's where like a coach comes in, or if that person is, humble enough to really look at this, what are they trying to do? And they're trying to make that symmetrical approach. But, that just kind of, when you were talking about this came to mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to pull up one of these old images and just see if I can see something. But that's, I'll never forget that because I tried it for like 2 years. Like, let me just swing as much as I can. I don't know. It's working for him.
Well, I mean, that's back to genetic thing, right? So part of I might be off by a couple numbers. There's 300 or something genes that just control muscle and fat gain, right? So you have to, the guys like a Flex Wheeler, all those genes are perfect. They're all aligned exactly perfect. The bigger ones are like Actin 2 and Actin 3, like Justin or Flex Wheeler or Ronnie Coleman, they're all Actin 3 dominant, which means they have all fast twitch fibers. So he can recruit immediately from the first rep, and those will hypertrophy 50% greater than the slow twitch ones. So like a guy who's better off doing endurance stuff is just not going to grow like that. Right. And then on top of it, he's got more androgen receptors and he's got probably a higher level of androgens. Right. And then you add things in, right? Like, I think people might argue with me, and no one really knows for sure, but one of the biggest differences you see if you look at bodybuilders from like the mid 80s to the 90s, the big shift, like the shoulders all of a sudden became massive. Like, there were a couple things happen, right? Insulin came in, growth hormone became accessible, trenbolone acetate was still in the US for a while, and then it became Parabol, but that was still prevalent. So you had a bunch of things that really caused that look, right? And then guys were using site enhancement oil too, which, I don't know how many people understand that, but most pros on the stage are using oil in their muscles as well. But I just think you see that switch, but it all sorts of genetics. Like guys like Dorian Yates he didn't will himself there. Like, yeah, he busted his ass, but the guy had phenomenal genetics.
It's the only thing I've ever found, certainly in a athletic endeavor. No one, literally the most like naive person in the game of basketball would say, I've never played and I'm getting into this elite summer league. I'm going to follow Kobe Bryant's 2004 training protocol. But almost everyone, I'm sure all of us involved in this conversation at some point when we were in our beginning stages is like, I'm going Dorian style. I got Blood and Guts on DVD. I'm going to do it exactly like him.
And it failed miserably.
Yeah.
That's the best. Like, I know Paul and I have talked about that exact example all the time. Basketball is the greatest one because it's really apparent that I'm never going to play pro basketball, no matter what I do. I'm going to say about 5 foot vertical. How's it ever going to work? I could all three, even at 5'9", you're still going to stuff me. I can't get around you. But yet people don't get that with bodybuilding. They're missing. It's like, well, my diet's got to be off, or there's a magical combination of drugs here that I'm just not taking, or maybe it's my training. Maybe if I train twice a day for 7 days a week, maybe I'll get there. Or if I get really fat first, that'll help me. It's like, no, unfortunately, you got to pick better parents.
Genetics, big time. I don't know.
But, sorry.
If you've ever seen that, Kurt, is like you have someone take some drugs and they just like do not respond to them. Yep. I worked with somebody and we were ramping things up and physique just never changed. And, he just started getting a lot of negatives. And I was like, man, I value you as a client, but I just don't think this is for you. Like, we can keep going down this road and keep beating your head against the wall, but we're putting in some milligrams and you are not changing at all. Yeah. You probably should pick something else like pickleball or badminton or whatever you want to do, but bodybuilding's probably not for you. And I'm sorry.
And I think I said that in the last one, that's what bodybuilding is. It's your genetic response to food, drugs, and training. That's it. Like, if you're the perfect storm in all three of them, I respond okay to steroids. I respond very well to training. I can get by with I was a sprinter. I can grow if I choose, but my problem is food. My metabolism is so not efficient. I have to eat like an idiot. Like I can literally, I never discuss my food with my clients because I feel like it just makes me look like an idiot. I can literally eat ice cream every day. It doesn't do anything to me. I can't even get at 50, I can't even get my body fat over single digits. Like Paul saw me the other day. He's like, you're always 6 weeks out all the time. That's just where I float. So, but like, that's not necessarily a good thing because it takes me 6,000 calories. Whereas like, a flex wheeler could probably eat 2,000 calories and get freaking huge.
Right.
So
that was the interesting part about Stan Efferding talking about working with Flex when he made the transition to bodybuilding. He's like, Flex would say these things and give me these insight, and everything that he did for me worked, but he would always have the caveat. He's like, I don't have to do it like you do because a little easier, a little easier for me.
And that's for all of us, right? We all have things that we're good at and things we're not. Like we just to figure out what's working and what's not working.
And here's two stories, because I think there's a lot of people who maybe don't have either the aspiration to ever step on stage, but even to get to like hardcore levels where they tune out to conversations like that. But I'll give you two stories where this applies even in just the regular Joe, regular gal who wants to look better territory. In 2000, I'm going to say 2005-ish, Carmen Electra came on the radio show to promote the Starsky and Hutch movie, right? Now I was a teenager in the 90s, so Carmen Electra she's at the top of the pantheon. I mean, like it was an 80-year-old man meeting Marilyn Monroe. It was unbelievable. So I wanted to make sure, like, I wasn't being creepy about it, but I wanted to introduce myself. And she's super sweet. She's in the green room getting ready to go on air, and she's eating a bagel with cream cheese and a regular Coke. It's like 7:30 in the morning. Regular soda and a bagel and cream cheese. And she finishes said bagel and asks for another soda to go on the air. And I go, you eat like that? You eat like that all the time? She's like, every day, all day. I don't eat. I've never dieted once. I've never thought about it. I eat junk food all day and drink soda almost exclusively. And then Julianne Hough from Dancing with the Stars, who is so nice and so sweet, and also like crazy hot. Like her body, all women really like the dancer's body, right? So I'm doing Dancing with the Stars, and I'm talking to her brother, who's also pro dancer on Dancing with the Stars, right? So she comes into the little like rehearsal area, and she starts there's like a bowl of candy, and she just starts picking it up and eating it like random candy, and she's just like shoveling it in her mouth like a 5-year-old. And I go, you just eat that all the time? And she's like, oh, dude, all day, all the time. So that night, crazy. I was like,
sorry, I'm listening.
So that night I drive home, and I'm stopped by Whole Foods to get groceries before I get home. And there's a Shape magazine, and she's on the cover, and it's Julianne Hough's Get Lean for Summer diet or whatever. And I was like, no way. So I pick it up, and I'm thumbing through, and it's like, I eat egg whites in the morning, and then, rice cakes and all this bullshit. Next day, I go back. I see Derek and I see Julianne. I go, what's with that? She goes, no one ever interviewed me or talked to me. They just made that like, it's all BS. And Derek told me, he's like, I've never seen her eat anything but candy and fast food. Like, that's all she does. And so, like, you can sit here and of course, I mean, she's a professional dancer. Yes, lifestyle. Carmen Electra, I'm sure, was an active person, but there's a genetic component to just some, the Victoria's Secret models can tell you all about their workout and everything. The reality is like, there's some weird part of Brazil where they're just born to be size 0 with perfect proportions,
We gotta check this now. Now I gotta see this. The viewers gotta know, Mike. They gotta see this little throwback here.
You don't have to watch my dancing.
That's so great.
The reality is that I was really successful on Dancing with the Stars, just not with dancing. I was a single man at that time, and it's a world of men and women who use their body to express themselves, and they're very open with that. And that's I'll leave it there.
Good times.
I did
had,
not know
but
that.
I lucked out as far as
Yeah.
like my season, as far as like busting balls and also like cool factor, because I had Ralph Macchio, Sugar Ray Leonard, Jericho, Chris Jericho, Wendy Williams. There's a couple of, but it was like perfect for idiot geeky radio guy to go around and like talk. And like I talked to Sugar Ray Leonard about fights, and he was cool. He would talk to Ralph Macchio about Karate Kid, and he was like how awesome is that for an 80s kid?
That's awesome.
So cool.
Way more important than winning. Oh, Heinz Ward was on, and and Heinz Ward, I have zero negative things to say, but he's a super nice guy. But he's also like, and anyone in the NFL in that era will tell you, he's not to be trifled with. And Heinz Ward is like he's a mean dude, and had no problem talking crap. I would just pick at him, and he'd be like, "Oh, that guy's this." That guy's like, "Oh, this is awesome." You made me promise not to say it on the air, but I was like, "Yeah, no, totally, more."
Where were we at the beginning too? I want to make sure we give some nerd nuggets today. Justin, we were talking about
DHT, and I kind of want to go off another vector with Kurt. Okay. What are your thoughts? Like, I think so many people, maybe not even the bodybuilding world, maybe just more in just men in general, and dihydrotestosterone. I heard you on another clip talking about DHT may not be fully responsible for hair loss, and there's a lot of genetic factors. So I actually do a lot of stuff to have this hair of mine. I would be bald without using different.
I don't have any hair anymore.
Different things to keep my hair. And I just kind of wanted to hear your stance on that and, talk a little bit about your thoughts of DHT. Should we inhibit it? Should we not? We spoke earlier, said it's not a carcinogenic. So just kind of giving like viewers some more info around that, because it's a common topic and we hear a lot of misinformation or cross information on DHT in general.
So just to touch on the carcinogenic thing, we could do a whole thing on that too, separately. So based on the structure of DHT or DHT derived androgens, they have what you call a saturated A ring. So when you look at testosterone, the A ring is the one on the left. That ring is saturated with bonds, and that therefore cannot become, I'm not going to make it too complicated. It cannot be a carcinogen because of the way it fits into the receptor. So DHT is really confusing. So you have testosterone, whether it's endogenous, produced by the body, or it's exogenous, like you're injecting it. It really is three fates, right? It's going to stay as testosterone. It's going to 5-alpha reduce to DHT, or it's going to aromatize to estrogen. So aromatization generally occurs in fat cells, but also occurs in your brain and your testes and small amounts in other places. But that's one of the reasons why the fatter someone is, the more estrogen they're going to produce generally. Obviously, there's one gene, a CYP gene, that controls aromatization, and some people just have more of that gene. So it doesn't always mean someone has to be heavier, but that's pretty much the standard. 5-alpha reduction to DHT occurs inside the cell, and certain cells, depending on where they are, have more 5-alpha reductase enzyme than others, and it tends to be location specific. Our scalp, our prostate, your skin. That's why all of us can shave our faces, versus a female doesn't typically have to shave their face unless they run tren. And the rate limit is basically you're born with it. So you are born with a certain amount of 5-alpha reductase, and that doesn't really change as far as we know. That science might change down the road. What we do now know, which is relatively new, is that serum DHT is useless. So measuring that in your labs doesn't tell you anything. Perhaps for some other disease or something we don't fully understand yet, maybe it'll have a role, but basically it's bound. So most hormones in serum are bound to sex hormone binding globulin. And when DHT specifically binds to sex hormone binding globulin, it renders it useless, totally useless, and it renders sex hormone binding globulin useless. So normally when testosterone is bound to it, it can still come off of it, and both testosterone will release, and sex hormone binding globulin itself has its own receptor that can cause an androgenic response. In the case of DHT, they're totally both useless. So measuring it in serum is not telling you anything. It's basically the excess that was spit out of the cell and that's become bound. So testosterone enters the cell through the androgen receptor. It will then convert, and then the excess, like garbage, gets spit back out. That's then bound and useless. So seeing an elevation in DHT in serum is not going to be indicative of hair loss or anything like that. It actually can't act on the cell once it's in the serum. Where was I going? The same with estrogen, which kind of goes back to your Dutch thing. We could touch on that too. So the fascinating thing about Dutch is estrogen in serum is also similar. That's converted inside of a cell, typically fat cells, and then the excess is spit out. So sometimes you'll find guys that'll have normal serum estradiol, but yet they'll have gyno, or they'll have some other estrogenic side, and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Their E2 is at 29. In that case, you could do a Dutch test, which in the US is not considered like standard medicine, but that's when you reach out to someone like you who understands that stuff, dealing with metabolites, and you can look, and sure enough, you'll find based on what the cell is spitting out in addition. And then you can, the standard course of treatment would still be using something like Arimidex to get rid of that, because even though you're not showing it in serum, it's still too high inside the cell.
Is there any utility with that, with estrogen metabolism? And I want to give a like a statement at the end of my question, I guess, but looking at like vitamin mineral deficiencies in that pathway, or is that such a small adjustment that would be that's maybe only in like women or like very, very lower, in fixing it? I can kind of give an analogy that I was.
Can you give an analogy?
It was, yeah. So like, the analogy was, so let's say, and I saw this, and maybe it was just the analogy just fit, but in blood work, I had a female who had low estrogen production, but they had estrogen dominant symptoms. And what we found was their estrogen metabolism. They explained it like a drain. Like if you had the faucet on and just a little bit of water's coming out, but if the drain is clogged, like
filling up,
that was eventually it's going to run over. So like if you clog your drain, even if it's a little bit of water, eventually it's going to roll over. And that led to the estrogen dominance. And then one of the initial protocols, potential solutions was like, we don't want to shut down estrogen production because her estrogen was
obviously.
So let's work on some of the deficiencies in the metabolism of the estrogen and things along the lines of like I remember like magnesium, zinc.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I don't know. I'm not taught that stuff. Justin, you might know more of that stuff.
So what I see more times than not is like, so you actually have 3 phases of estrogen metabolism.
Yeah.
Looking at the gut is probably the most important. So you have beta glucuronidase, which can reabsorb estrogen through the digestive tract. So looking at if there's some sort of issue at the GI tract and there's reabsorption, that's usually where I would start. Anecdotally, I've always had a lot of digestive issues. So even like a calcium deglucarate inhibits beta glucuronidase. So for me, I can escalate testosterone and inhibit beta glucuronidase and handle that drug better. I like to look there, and then I'll look at phase 2. That's, where methylation happens, where glucuronic acid is attached at that point so it can conjugate. A lot of times methyl donors are needed there. So, methylated B vitamins, methylfolate, those things are very important. And then after looking at that, if those 2 look good, then we go down our CYP, so our hydroxylated water-based systems, and how we're metabolizing E1 through E3 and making sure we're picking a preferred pathway. So picking the less carcinogenic pathway, the pathway that's going to turn into, I think, 2-methoxy E1. So you're able to then metabolize that appropriately. I think there's some like application there for men in bodybuilding and using testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
It is very true with women. Women are by design have more estrogen than we do. And when we see estrogen dominant like symptoms, there's usually a hang up in one of those 3 phases. What I see people doing is not looking at that correctly and, just throwing in some dim or trying to do something, but not really addressing the picture.
Way too up top. Yeah. Way too up at the top that's not the problem. The estrogen production is the problem. But I had 2 quick follow-up questions too. One is, and again, mind you, 3 years ago, right, when I really was going in the weeds in this, so I'm probably going to misrepresent my question, but I'll do my best. Upstream, are there protocols being used, Justin, that would drive a less active form of estrogen in, let's say, women showing estrogen dominance symptoms, like upstream when it's breaking down to go to that E1, E2, E3 pathway, like to kind of get it to the more inactive or less aggressive? I'm drawing a blank if is it E3 that's the more?
E3 is pregnancy.
Okay. So maybe I'm thinking of
E4 as well.
Yeah,
E1 is from androstenedione, which will generally in women be first, and then it's going to aromatize from there further. You could maybe somehow you could inhibit that so it stays. E1 will still bind to the estrogen receptor. It's just 1/10 of the strength. That's why when guys take EQ, boldenone, that on lab work you see it crushes their E2, but it's still aromatizing to E1, so it's still blocking the estrogen receptor. It's just not causing gene transcription at the same strength. But I don't, as far as like we're only taught like when you were doing that, like the digestion thing is 100% correct with estrogen. That's where a lot of these cancers come from, is from the gut, sending it back to the liver. We're only taught the hydroxylation stuff. You're taught those other things. We don't look at vitamins, unfortunately.
Well, my second question on that too, just is there I'm trying to remember from the stool samples testing, is there because it's packed, isn't there a fourth phase of estrogen metabolism in the stool, or am I misremembering something?
Probably that E4, that hydroxylation, that's a carcinogen. That's supposed to be excreted. But what you see commonly in America is people don't eat enough fiber, right? Their diet is very processed and very shitty, no pun intended. And they're not, excess estrogen is supposed to be shit out, and it's just not, right? They don't have enough fiber, so it's not sticking. Like the simplest way to look at it, it's not basically binding to it, and you're not passing it out. So it's going back to the liver. And when it does that, it can potentially become a carcinogen, or it can become E16. Now, you and I mentioned that before. Some of that stuff gets, again, beyond like the stuff that I would look at. That's more like metabolite stuff that you guys would look at.
Yeah, no, now I'm like pissed because I'm trying to find my old test. I know I have it on my computer somewhere to like look at the pathway.
DHT and hair while you look that up.
Sure, yeah.
So
allergies get us. I got us off track.
I think just to make it really simple for people, I think in a natural person who's not using steroids, DHT is the strongest androgen in the body and has 3 times the affinity for the androgen receptor that testosterone does. So in a normal person, if you have the genetics for hair loss and you have a certain amount of DHT, it's going to make hair fall out. As far as anabolic steroids are concerned, it then tends to not be a DHT issue all the time. It becomes so on a hair follicle, you have an androgen receptor, your prolactin receptor, your progesterone receptor, estrogen receptor. It can be a ton of different things that are occurring at the follicle that can make the hair fall out. Like trenbolone is notorious for hair loss. That's probably where most of mine went. And that doesn't 5-alpha reduce at all. It just, my hair came out in clumps. I was in prep for a show and I drove my estrogen really low, which didn't help my hair. And using Mastron and Tren and too much test, and my hair came out in clumps and never really regrew. So it's generally not, at least in steroid users, it's not always DHT. I think that's just where people are confused by it. In a natural person, it tends to be DHT.
Could you
but
touch on
androgenic too, on its own?
Could you touch on, because you get so many questions regarding DHT and then hair loss, especially guys are neurotic about it, understandably. Can you explain to me from a dummy standpoint? I look at most of the guys because everyone always asks about, I'm sure Justin gets it too. They ask me, what do I do for my hair? What kind of surgery I got? I was like, I hit a genetic lottery. Like we talked about earlier. My dad is 82 and has a full head of hair. Same with his father and vice versa. And down the line. But guys that naturally lose their hair earlier, I tend to notice are naturally leaner, more muscular. And also I've seen reports that say they have higher levels of testosterone.
Yes.
What happens then? What is that carryover that makes it?
It's called CAG repeat. So on the androgen receptor, you have something called a CAG repeat, and it's a sequence of codons of genes. And you don't really want extreme on either direction because there's disease associated with both. You kind of want to be in the middle, but unfortunately, the guys who are physically genetic freaks tend to have I'm gonna get this backwards, a longer CAG repeat. They also tend to be more bald. That's why you see guys with higher androgen levels. It's not necessarily the higher androgen levels, it's the CAG repeat on the androgen receptor.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's basically taking more genes and applying them, over and over and over again, a sequence that normal people don't necessarily have. Guys with the opposite effect tend to have a softer physique, right? So it's not necessarily the androgen directly. When you talk about inhibiting DHT, I wouldn't personally take it systemically. DHT is a huge function inside of our body to make us a man. And you can have major sexual issues by inhibiting it. I would consider a topical DHT inhibitor, perhaps. I would consider Right. Minoxidil will help it regrow, but you need to block the effect first because minoxidil generally won't be strong. You're not going to regrow it faster than it'll fall out if it's falling out. So I would usually use something like that, like topical finasteride or dutasteride, something. I don't stay up on these. There's a bunch of them now. You can even use something like, it's not FDA approved, but there's something called RU58841. That's technically a topical androgen receptor blocker. It does work. It has a really unstable shelf life, and it's worth. I can give you a link. You can put it down below. There's this guy in Salt Lake City I buy from, and he basically sells you the raw. You just have to mix it with propylene glycol, keep it in the fridge. Or you can buy. He has a pre-made too if people don't want to play chemist in their house. I mean, that's generally the safest way. Just catch it before it starts to go. I let mine go too far, and then I tried to, I prevented the rest of it from going. But
I can show while you guys are talking, or Justin or Kurt. I'll just show this. As a visual for people out there. I don't know how good of a visual to be, but just kind of shows the, wrong one. Sorry. That's not a good visual. Let me try this again. Redo.
Let's not rush to judgment. It was a nice visual.
I appreciate that. But this is the, like the different estrogen pathways, which was kind of in that test. I don't know. Like we were talking earlier, just kind of for the audience for a visual, like E1, E2, E3, and I think, Justin, you were talking about 16-OHE1, or am I remembering wrong?
No, you're right. And, so I worked with an OBGYN for many of years at a clinic, and we would talk a lot about 16-OHE1 and how it is very proliferative. So it's great for bone. So if we look at women going through menopause, having enough estrogen is going to help keep bone in place. 16-OHE1 is great for that, but it's also could be proliferated by tissue. My understanding, the CYP3A4, you'll see that in between the estradiol and estriol at the top. Right that here? Is yes. Nope. Over by the dials.
Apologies. What was it again?
CYP3A4, right down there by those arrows.
This is CYP3A4 right here. Is it somewhere else?
Yeah, it's going to be up by the three dials at the very top, with the estrogen portion next to estradiol E2.
Oh, yep, I got you right here.
Kurt, that's a liver process, correct? So most of that is going to be, my understanding of that is it's great for a lot of things, but can potentiate growth. My thoughts around that, again, I'm not a doctor, but, with men, and estrogen to a degree can be carcinogenic. Having a large amount of that could proliferate tissue. That's where my mind goes. Obviously, I'm not a medical doctor, but what I see with a lot of guys is they're always trying to inhibit DHT and maybe not looking at the full picture of estrogen.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we touched on that last time, and I probably say this in every podcast I'm on. That's where the mistakes are going on now. Is that we were just trying to outdo the crushing of estrogen that you saw with guys with HRT, right? They're given 150 milligrams of test and they're taking a milligram of Arimidex a day. And their estrogen was a 4. That's not what we're looking for, right? We just want it in range. And then everyone took that. It's very American. It was like, if a little bit is good, then a ton must be amazing. So like, screw having an estrogen in range. I want it like a woman that's ovulating. I want to lactate. And then I'm going to pay someone to solve why my penis is broken. That's what I'm going to do.
Or my gut's wrecked. That's the other.
I have 4 to 5 calls a week of guys that they have sexual issues, and they send me their labs, and their estrogen's 200. And I'm like, you don't know why your penis is broken? I'm like, I have no clue. I'm on 750 tests. I should be able to hammer nails in with it. And I said, because my wife's estrogen when she's ovulating is 150, and yours is higher than hers. That's why your dick doesn't work. Really? But I saw Derek on More Plates, More Dates said, okay, so he's not a doctor, so let's not do that game anymore. He's wrong. Let's get it in range. And then they call you a week later and like, wow, it works. My wife is really happy.
It's funny how quick the aromatase inhibitors work. That's what I tell people. I'm like, if it's an estrogen issue, let's take 2 doses of it, and you'll know by next week if things are starting.
You'll know by tomorrow.
Yeah, some sensitivity back, and you got some blood flow, and then I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
It's weird that guys whose wives are happy that they want to bang more.
Not often.
My wife would love it if I cut my dick off. My life would be over the moon.
Yes, I'm still looking for the testosterone flavored coffee creamer, or the what was the other one? Not what was the other one, Justin? Oh gosh, I'm rusty, man. What the peptide for sex?
Oh, PT-141.
PT-141. Now they've made it now where it's like in my GP's office, and they made it like all pink and flowery, like now, and they changed the name of it to make it less sciencey sounding and more like for women. They're like, oh well, this is what I was like, no, it's to get the juices going. So I'm like, do you guys have that in like a coffee cream, like maybe a French vanilla? Like, oh honey,
I don't know if any of you guys ever tried that.
Makes coffee for me every morning.
It just turned me like bright red like a tomato.
It's awful. Yeah.
How is this like a good feeling?
I've never had success. I've seen like some people really like it. My stomach hurts and I get super like
not in the mood for sex.
Yeah, I'm like, that's the last thing I want to do. I'm like cramping. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've seen it marketed as like arrow spray. I'm like, you spray 2 of that up your nostril, you're gonna go to bed upset. Like, you should look at some other vectors too.
There's better things to put up your nose if you want to have sex. 157 or whatever it is. 141. Sorry.
I hate to burst in again with dumb guy stuff.
No, please do.
But we were talking about not properly analyzing why recovery's screwed up.
Oh, we can talk about that.
And because I recently got in trouble where people misinterpreted what I was saying. I simply said that everyone always looks to sleep and food, and they're constantly like, I eat this much protein, I'm having my rice all day, blah blah blah. I sleep 8 hours, and I said, yeah, but what if your programming's totally janky? That's gonna screw up your recovery more than anything. And that got bastardized into I don't think sleep and food is important. And I saw Paul Carter actually had
that's what I was going to say. Paul said something brilliant about that.
He had like the same kind of problem that his words get bastardized. But the reality is like, especially with young dudes who are motivated, their programming so distorted that it has to be the main culprit when you're talking about lack of recovery.
Yeah, I mean, and all the things that they're doing. All the social influencers outside of Paul Carter that they're following are teaching them to do the wrong things, right? Too much training, too much volume, too many reps, too many days of training, and long length stuff. So it's not to say that there's not stretch mediated hypertrophy, but like when you put your quadricep, like if you do a hack squat or a sissy squat, that'll cause more fatigue than like a leg extension. We just know that because the calcium is going to build up. And that's, I mean, I would check your programming. Something I've done, like I've brought my training way down and I feel much better. Again, I'm not young, but it just, I realized I was training too much. I was tired all the time. And so a lot of times when clients come to me and that's like their concern, their sleep is trash, they're not recovering, it's generally not their food. And so as long as you have their food set and it's not total garbage, you're right. It's a training problem and everyone wants more, right? They're like, well, what if I do more cardio and more lifting? And all these guys are lifting 6 days a week. Yeah, but they're 20 and they're gifted. Maybe you don't need to lift 6 days a week.
And it gets back to that one. They're doing it because they're pretty far down the road. Not only do they have the genetics, they've been doing it. They're at a professional stage or they're at a high NPC stage. You can't compare that to someone who's got kids and a job. And that's, you know what I'm saying? Like you have to factor in all those other aspects that are automatically going to be taken away from your recovery. Then you throw in, I'm training, my 6-day push-pull leg split. And I was like, well, no wonder your recovery's janky,
And with the genetic thing, again, people they don't love this answer, but it's the unfortunate truth. The better your genetics are, the less training you need. Now, that doesn't mean the guys with amazing genetics don't train more. It just means they don't need to do that much. They just choose to do that. And the steroids mask that recovery issue. Right? Like anyone here who's ever done more than TRT knows that you can do a ton more. You're never going to get sore. You can probably train the same body part every day within reason. Right? And you'll probably still make some level of progress. Is that ideal? Absolutely not. It's not ideal. But
what's your take? I'd love all three of your guys' take on this.
I
don't want to encourage people to overtrain or undertrain. But if you had to pick one, slightly undertrain, to me is better.
Yeah, I would go with that too.
Over time, you learn your limits of what you can recover from. And I agree, the more you train, you're probably able to connect with certain muscles better over time, just because it's just like anything else. It's something that you learn to do, so you're better at that skill. So, my 3 sets of squat, maybe enough to grow my legs versus someone who may need 6 sets because they can't connect with that muscle. And it's not all mind muscle connection, but I do think that does play a role in how to execute the movements. I work with a lot of like guys 25 and, you know, they're going super crazy and their form's terrible and they're squatting. Mind you, they want to bodybuild. And they're like, I don't see you train like that. I was like, well, you know, I've torn my hamstring and I have a slight tear in my pec. You're going to have to maybe blow a muscle out and then learn how to train appropriately because you think you're invincible right now. But over time, you learn your limits. And then with that, you learn, okay, what is my recovery capacity? And when I'm over that, then my cortisol's out of whack. My digestion's out of whack. I can't sleep. Are you going to grow if any of those things are messed up? Absolutely not. Those are probably the most important things. And if you're really fatigued, probably shouldn't go to the gym. You should probably hydrate. You should eat some food and get some good sleep. That's what I usually recommend, but no one ever wants to listen to that. They don't want to miss the session. I'm like, dude, you're not going to lose any weight.
You're not losing anything.
Yeah, not at all. It's not how it works.
And it's, and again, not that, you know, Dorian Yates was the know-it-all this stuff, but if you actually look at the way he was the best in the world. He was training 4 days a week, right? And he was putting minimal amount of work in. He was just pushing each set as hard as he physically could. You know, guys will argue like, well, he always hurt himself. Yeah, he hurt himself on year 10 or something. He tore his bicep. If you train like him, you'd rip a bicep too. That happens, right? That's an unfortunate risk of being a professional athlete who's getting injured. But it just that's generally a better method than just training all the time, right? I always find in commercial gyms, the skinniest dudes are always there the most. Like there's this one kid that one of the gyms that I go to often, there's this one kid, he must have 14-inch arms and he must do 30 sets of arm stuff while I'm there. He's doing them before I get there and he's still doing them when I leave. And his arms have never changed because he should just be home resting and eating at that point. Not lifting.
Or also, there's the aspect of just recreational training too. Like people find, and don't get me wrong, I'm one of those people who definitely finds the mental health boost of being in the gym, but like that's one thing that has to come is that transition from like, well, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to do some sets. I like training arms and chest, so I'm going to train arms and chest. Women, typically it's glutes. But then if you can really take that 35 to 45 minutes and make it about your really focused work sets, you know, when you transition from exercise to training, that's when people see the difference. And it's like, oh, now I understand why he was saying.
Most general people don't understand that.
And now I understand. Now I get it because the 4 times a week and the amount of time that they're there, I'm actually focused and driven to get the achievement.
Well, let me ask you, and because you guys are all successful in your own right, something that I've always thought about, and maybe it's not 100% right, or maybe I'll say it wrong. I feel like there's 2 types of people with that stuff. There's like process people and there's results people. And there's nothing wrong with the process, but the process to me is someone who's very out of shape and you ask them and they go to the gym. Right? That's a process. But what have they accomplished? They've not actually accomplished anything. Versus if I say to you, Joe, what have you done this year? You could probably list all the things that you've done with your business and personally with your family, right? But it's about a result. Like an executive of a company, they don't want to hear, if they go to their secretary and they ask where a project is, they don't want to hear they're working on it.
Right.
That's not the right answer. The project is done. It's on your desk, right? Like when I go to the gym, when you guys go to the gym, it's about what are you trying to accomplish? I don't care what it takes to get there. I'm not focused on like how many sets. And like you were saying before, Justin, with the 3 sets, part of that also is because the weight you're moving is much greater probably too, right? Like some newbie who's going to squat 135, like how many sets of 135 does it take, right? But if you're going to 405 or whatever you're squatting, like how many sets of 405 could you possibly squat? Like you just don't have the nervous system to move that 10 sets.
No, it's to give like a non-scientific answer that I was told, and I was very fortunate in like the early 2000s. Back in the day, there was Weight Station in Michigan, and I mentioned this to Dave Tate too, because he was at help me out here. What the heck? Why am I drawing a blank? Westside. He was at Westside, and so they would all. You know, that was one of the crews that would compete with them. Well, a guy by the name, and people can Google him, he held a bunch of world records. He's passed away now. He was in his late 70s when I met him, but Don Yezbek, and he took me under his wing to train, and he trained me for my first powerlifting meet, and he would rip me, and he'd be like, gosh, damn it, you need to leave the gym stronger than when you came in. And like, it was all about like now there's all these studies, reps and reserve and deloads and blah, blah, blah. But he was you know, back in the 50s doing this stuff where it was like you leave stronger. Nope. I know you can do 3 more reps, or I know you can do another ratchet up or whatever. And it, like, that was like just embedded in my head because I got bitched out so many times by these mass monsters when I'm a 20-year-old kid. And you know, I was like, well, I mean, he did lift in the Olympics and did pretty well there. So I think I'll listen to him. But that like stuck with me. And then later in exercise phys and all that, I started like connect the dots more and more. And it still was early 2000s. So the studies still weren't really showing that, but now you can kind of see that. But I was grateful for that. And then I want to say a comma. The other part was another guy in that group who was a world record holder told me to drink a case of beer the night before the powerlifting meet because it makes you piss strong. So I don't know if there's any scientific research that backs that. I did not do that, but so I was, you know, was kind of wrestling in my mind with how intelligent the group was, but the results seemed to be produced, and you know, the rest is history. But I thought that just popped up to me. This old man, and his one finger was like the size of my 3 fingers. Like it was just incredible guy. But he approached me one day, and I was doing squat and deadlift in the cage, like the rack, and gave me a few pointers. And people were like, do you know what that is? Like, I'm like, no. Like, he's like, that's Don Yesbeck. I'm like, I don't know. Like, again, mind you, like, we had MySpace right back then, so it's like, you know, I couldn't like Google him,
and he probably wasn't on MySpace.
No, he wasn't anywhere, right? So now I can Google him and see some stuff about him. But yeah. So, anyways, it was just one of those cool things. Is he ended up working with me for a couple months before I like connected the dots of who he was, and I was like, oh, and but yeah, it was like that old man, old school. Just they knew it 60, 70 years before all this stuff came out, you know, to prove it. So little fun anecdote side story there, but
no. And just to clarify, so people don't think I'm saying the opposite, I don't think, at least I'm not saying, I don't think any of you are saying not to work hard. That wasn't right.
Yeah.
I just, you still need to, and I know AJ Sims and I talk a lot about the mental aspect of this stuff. If you want to be successful in any sports, you really have to push yourself, and you really have to like embrace the suck. That being said, that doesn't mean doing more all the time is the right answer either. It just means use that time wisely, get the shit done, and go home. Right. And
do better. Do better. I mean, I like, especially now with smartphones, you know, not to sound like, you know, this old codger, but it just makes it so hard for someone to make that transition to really understanding what focused training is, because most people, you see them and they're just like, I'm sure that kid, you know, with the 14-inch arms that trains a lot, it's just the amount of time that's wasted in the gym is so extraordinary. It's so extraordinary compared to whenever I see the guys and gals who have achieved the bodies that really turn my head. One of the common things I always see is like when they're in the gym, they have the eye of the tiger, you know, and it sounds so corny, but it's absolutely true.
There was a story, I'm not going to misquote it, but there was a cool story about Arnold Schwarzenegger at the original Gold's Gym, like when he was still like coming up. And I think Joe Weider called him. Back then there was only a payphone in the back, and someone ran and got him. He was like, Arnold, Joe Weider's on the phone for you. And he was like, so I'll call him back when I'm done. I'm working out. Like it was the guy who could make or break his future. He didn't give a shit. He was lifting.
Right.
Like, that's it. Like, what are you doing? Why are you on the phone right now? Get off the phone.
And Arnold, and you know, everyone who has any familiarity they'll also bring up this story of like, yeah, but Arnold used to hold court. I was like, no. Arnold used to hold court at the gym when there was cameras there.
Yeah.
Because he's also a professional entertainer. He's one of the best. He knew that believe me, I'm sure there was a lot more stories of like, yeah, but I'm working than there was of him, you know, hiding someone else's shirt or, you know, making fun of them for not getting chicks, you know, and like doing that whole like pumping iron thing. Because that was Arnold in front of a camera, and that's a whole different beast, you know?
Totally. Those guys all busted their ass in a different way, right? I think those guys are really misunderstood too. I think a lot of guys see stuff written about them now. Like Mike Mentzer is probably the most understood because he didn't do the lunatic stuff that he talked about at the end of his life when he was on crystal meth. He trained like the rest of them. He maybe did a little less than the rest of them, but he trained pretty similar to them. He wasn't that nuts. I think he became broken. He had really big mental problems, and he was trying to figure out a solution to make money. And he's like, you can't sell the high volume thing because Weider was already doing that. What are you going to sell? So you're going to go the opposite direction, and you still work out once every 7 days. That sounds like a good idea.
And it's one of the very few things I've ever seen where the internet is a godsend. because we can sit and bitch and moan about all the negative aspects to the internet and to smartphones and whatnot. But one of the things I've seen is even guys I knew that I grew up with and I'd be around training that were trying to mentor me, that were big mentor hit proponents. Now, because of the way that information is getting out and pervasive, and people who really knew the guy are like, they're like, oh yeah, this was all crazy. Yes, the idea of high intensity training, there's the basics, the foundational points are very smart. But some of the stuff that Mike was saying towards the end of his life, like this is crazy, you know?
No, I mean, everyone that knew him knew he was crazy. It was really sad, I'm sure, to watch.
But when you were relegated to Flex Magazine and maybe a chat room here and there, like that stuff, people were still selling it, like you know, Colorado experiment, blah blah blah. You know, and I'm like, dude, now like the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, I mean, we all know Casey did drugs during that thing. And Casey also was huge before. He cut his hand. He almost lost his hand, and then he like took 3 years off training or something and shriveled up,
right?
And then gained. Then what's his name? Whoever ran the Colorado experiment, the guy who invented the model was Arthur Jones. Grabbed him and did the experiment. It was like you could easily regain. Like I could go down if I stop training. I can be 140 pounds in 6 months from now. I could easily go back to 240 in 6 months. Does that mean I gained 100 pounds of muscle in 6 months? Yeah, I regained 100 pounds of muscle. Doesn't mean it was the first time the tissue was there. Right? You don't lose the mitochondria.
Good point, Kurt, because you were talking about that in a different clip of how genetics change to a degree after you introduce androgens, and that ability to regain size. I've been bodybuilding off and on for 10 plus years, but there's a period in time where I just stopped training, and I got really small. Then I started introducing food and drug back into the mix, and I gained all my muscle back relatively quick. I think Paul's probably similar to that, working with Justin. Took some time off, and then, granted, he's grown a lot, but he had that huge jump. I feel like a lot of that tissue was already there. He just needed the supply to kind of ignite that and fill back out.
Did you see mine?
And also, can you imagine how the difference is with someone like Paul, or like Kurt was saying, if you were to take that time off, purposely lose the weight? Imagine how much difference it would be to train properly. Just the mindset, the know-how, the receptors, everything's so much more elevated compared to someone who's trying to make a change, just from nothing.
Here, you want to see? So I did the same thing as you're talking about Paul Barnett.
Yeah.
So I did the same thing, except I'm naturally thin. So when I was 39, I got a corporate job in New York City, and I just stopped training. I didn't mean to. It was one of those things. I understand when guys say this to me that they just couldn't train. Like I did it too. I didn't mean to. It just one day I just stopped going to the gym, and I literally started lifting weights in 1987. So it was not something I ever thought I would ever do. It's not something I'd ever do again. Like I'll definitely promise that. And I literally whittled down. I started drinking booze and eating shit food, and I whittled down. I don't even know what I weighed because I didn't weigh myself. I was probably 120 pounds. And then at 39, I got back in the gym, and I gained and I was also in Lifetime Natural at that point. So I gained initially like 40 or 50 pounds back really fast. And then I went on a cycle and I gained another 50 pounds. But I did that from the age of 39 to 47. I put on almost 100 pounds.
Wow.
The same thing, but it was like most of that tissue was already there because I was competing in bodybuilding when I was younger. So it wasn't like all new. Some of it's new tissue, but I can show you. Where would I send a picture if you want to put it up?
You send it to me wherever you want. Email, Instagram, whatever.
Cool.
Grinder.
Grinder. I'll just put it on Facebook.
Put it on Grinder.
Open marketplace.
I'll just pull up your OnlyFans, Kurt, really quick. That's always my joke to my wife. I'm like, I'm gonna spin up an OnlyFans. We'll be okay. We'll get some money going. She's like, shut up.
I wish that wouldn't be true for me, but I can't tell you. I get like one female DM, which is probably a bot anyway, for 200 males. They're like, come down here, break you off. I'm flattered, sir, but
that's how I feel. I'm like, thank you for the offer, but no, thank you.
Yeah. I don't have that problem. So
I sent it to you, Joe. You should have it, I think.
Oh, yep, got it. All right. Let's see here.
I mean, so that's 39. My son was a year old at the most. I should know this, and he's 9 now.
Yeah,
Granted, I mean, obviously, like I cleaned my diet up. I stopped drinking. I did all the stuff you're supposed to do. This wasn't just drugs.
Just pulling it up here. Just taking a second. There we go.
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
Holy crap.
Just a
When
little.
I'm 30 pounds heavier, not on the bottom now. That was
Look
at
at
47.
you, dude. Holy moly.
But I could be like, look at this. I use Celtec creatine.
Yeah.
Right.
And I gained 85 pounds of muscle using your creatine product.
Believe
You
me,
can
I've
put that on
tried
your
that.
stuff. No, I used Renal Reset. This was all Renal Reset right here.
We have a creatine product now, so I'm gonna
Yes,
use
okay,
it.
so just your
There you
creatine
go.
product. You can use that image.
6 weeks. I did one loading phase of
6 weeks.
creatine.
That's it.
I got a little crazy. I went up to 15 grams a day.
I loaded first, and then I maintained at 5 grams. He's like Lee Priest. He's like, I used 200 milligrams of Primo and 400 milligrams of Deca. And I got to whatever, I mean, right. Okay. That was a day or a week you're talking.
Yeah.
No offense to Lee Priest, but we all know that that's not the truth.
I think that it's really cool how open people are with drug use. I think there's like pros and cons with it for sure, because now a bunch of younger people want to do that. But at the same time, actually shedding light of like, hey, it wasn't just a supplement. Because I am guilty in like 2008, being in high school, grabbing some Celtec, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it. This is the year, and nothing happened. You're like, man, this stuff sucks. What's
He's got
going
that
on?
big tub of dextrose that you just like. I became
We got
diabetic.
some rad water weight.
Yeah, now I have type 2 diabetes.
Well, and Justin, the crazy thing now, and I'm trying to clear it up without busting people's names, but like, is the total bullshit within that, because these guys all became transparent about the drug use, right? It was too obvious that they're on drugs, but now they lie about what they're using.
Yeah.
And it became this like, oh no, it's, and again, Paul and I have done a bunch of stuff in this, and I fell prey to this too, because I believed it for a while. I knew better, and then I started believing maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm the only one who abuses drugs, and these guys are just using minimal amounts of everything. It was like they're on 750 test and 750 Primo, and they weigh 300 pounds, and that's all they ever used.
I think in competitive bodybuilding, there's a certain level of danger with the dishonesty. But most people who have any level of knowledge about weight training or fitness know that if you're stepping on stage, you're on drugs. My biggest concern now is like the influencer, like I think the Liver King's probably the best example, where they're literally out there making a living talking about, I do A, B, and C. It's all about my healthy lifestyle. I don't use any drugs. And you're like, dude, I can see the injections on your belly. I can see where you pull your belly away to make your injections, and that really worries me, because I think, like I said, even like a 16-year-old kid, highly motivated kid, knows people stepping on an IFBB stage are on drugs.
Yeah.
But the guy who's promoting his whatever it is online, that's a whole new beast.
Yeah. Well, and where I find it confusing, again, I don't disagree. And I think that these guys, a lot of them are just like, I don't want the kids to copy what I'm doing because it's risky. And, I don't want people to think that it takes away from my hard work. Unless you're an idiot, the pro bodybuilders work hard, right? These guys live and breathe this crap every day. Like no one ever said they don't work hard. And then no one ever said that it's all drugs, because anyone's ever trained and done drugs knows it's not just drugs. That being said, I also don't think 16-year-olds are going to copy them, because what the open guys are doing, one, no 16-year-old can afford it.
Right.
You would have the worst side effects. You'd do it one time and you would never touch steroids again. I mean, we're talking, again, like I'm not going to name, like one of the bigger open guys, not his very pre-contest cycle, but leading up to that, he was on 5,000 milligrams of testosterone and 5,000 milligrams of trinacetate, 5 milligrams of methyltrianolone, which will kill you, and 2,000 milligrams of equipoise. This is all a week that he's taking, and 2 bottles of Serostim a day. So 36 grams of Serostim. And then you were talking at least 200 units of insulin, and you're talking IGF. So IGF is toxic at 250 micrograms. They're using 1,000 micrograms of IGF. Increlux. This isn't a joke. What kid is affording this? You're talking thousands of dollars, and you would be dead. Like if you weren't that, and not that these big guys aren't going to be dead anyway, but like this is not a realistic thing for a young kid to do. And it doesn't mean all the guys are doing that, because someone's going to watch this video and they're going to make a comment and they're going to be like, I'm an IFBB pro and I've never used more than 4 units of growth hormone in my life. But that's unfortunately not the case for a lot of them. There are obviously levels, right? They all use different stuff, but that is a real cycle that I know someone, that's what they use. And it's not that rare. And where it comes from is they copy each other. So like the pros that I coach, I give them advice. I don't give them that advice. That's not where my head ever is. And then they talk to their friends and they're like, yeah, but he's doing that. So I need to do that if I want to hang with him.
Right.
No, you don't, because he's going to die doing that. They all want to just copy each other. So it just becomes this escalating thing where they're constantly trying to play catch up with their friends.
I think, I don't know what you can do though, too, with the mindset of a gentleman or a lady who's making that choice to be the best of the best on a stage. But when I knew two dudes personally that didn't get but I'm gonna die till it was too late. You know, they were literally in hospice at age 40 something. Like, and they didn't make that. I know, but I want it, but you're gonna die. They didn't recognize the last part until it was too late, you know. And I don't know how to impart that message. I don't even know if necessarily it would matter to a lot of these guys.
No, I've had a conversation with one of them who's ranked in the world, and his whole thing is that he'd rather be dead than be mediocre. Like, dude, but you're not mediocre. You're in the top X in the world.
Right.
But that's mediocre to me because I'm not number one in the world. But you might die. So be it.
Maybe that's a conversation that just has to be had more. Like, because we can say bodybuilders, but I guarantee if you pick an Olympic sport,
it's all
most of these guys and gals would say the same thing. They're like, yeah, but you can win a gold medal, but you'll die. They're like, so.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it's with anything at that level. Sure, even acting, right? The sacrifices guys will make to be in a movie, make $20 million. Who cares?
No, it's true.
I'm sure, at any level, if you're going to do that. But so my point is, I don't think it's like a concern for no kid is going to copy that crap. They wouldn't even know where to buy Incrolux. They don't know where to get Cerestem. They're not going to, this is not something they're going to copy. And it doesn't take away from their work. It just shows that it's really disordered.
Right. I hate to do it, but I unfortunately have to go, gentlemen. But thank you so much. And
no, thank you. We can
talk
kind
to
of
you
wind down here.
Yeah.
That was a depressing way to end. Sorry.
You're supposed to
I'll
be
leave
the
you with
energy and the personality. I'm the drive.
Earlier, we're talking about the saturated A ring.
Yeah.
If I have too many chili dogs, I get a saturated O ring.
Exactly. That's the same thing. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Any final? I think next one I'll pull up some old videos of me when I was 19. My first bodybuilding show. We'll show you what a guy who should be playing center in the NBA instead of bodybuilding looks like. But
what do you have?
All right, folks, I want to take a quick break from this episode to tell you about the new e-course that Kurt Havens and I have put together, The Scientific Principles of Anabolics and PEDs. This is the most comprehensive PED e-course ever put together with over 80 modules, including intros to PEDs, major steroid profiles, competitor off-season cycles, non-competitor cycles, contest prep cycles, HGH fundamentals, insulin fundamentals, side effect management, safer use concepts, fat loss agents, estrogen management, and advanced PED and hypertrophy science. It is the best course out there of its kind. Go check it out. Link is in the video description below.
What do you have it filmed on? It's like VHS?
I can pull it up really quick. Hold on. I got it right here. No, it was, I don't even know how I got it. I think it was from the
MPC stuff.
Yeah, we had a little, the old camcorder back in the day.
Very cool.
Here, I'll show you really quick. We'll make it quick and then we can end on this and get everybody. I'm sure all of our people are going to tune out.
Nice.
So this is me at 19 years old.
You look great for 19. What year is this? 2002?
2002, yes.
Back's pretty developed.
Yeah, you look great. I don't think, you know this because you do this and you know this, Justin. It just, the amount of years it takes to get truly massive it's a huge commitment, right? Like there's very few kids at 19 that are going to be any bigger than that.
What'd you weigh there?
Probably
210.
Yeah, about that. Get a little bit. I mean, I'll tell you in a second what I was. So let me stop it. Sorry. I was doing Body Opus, Dan Duchesne's Body Opus, and I was getting super peeled. And I met this guy. He had the best of intentions, and like the last 3 weeks, he tried to help me. Man, I was slamming apple juice like the week before the show, and all kinds of weird shit. And I was like, man, this doesn't seem right. He's like, no, you're healthier. You're going to be. And now I look at like, again, I was still 19. So it is what it is. But I look at like, because I remember we had a trainer at the gym came up to me. And I mean, they used to call it like robot mode. Like I'm a little OCD. And so I was not going to cheat on like the Dan Duchesne plan, right? Like it was very intense. And, they were coming up to me because my face was so sunken in, like it was definitely death face. And they're like, and there you can see it's a little more plump. And I didn't know any better. But then after that, I did another show, and then I think after that, then I met Justin, and kind of the knowledge really connected between the formal education, what I was reading online on the internet, and the books, and then because I read a lot of Chris Aceto stuff. At 19 years old, actually at 17 years old, I should have never read Body Opus at 17 years old. Like that is a freaking problem. You want to talk about somebody who has some mental issues with body image, right? Like I read that at 17, and I got some, I won't pull them up now, but I got some pictures at 17 that, I got pretty, really, really pretty lean. But like when I graduated high school, I was 235 and pretty strong and whatnot. There's definitely some kids I know because I volunteer at the local high school, a lot bigger and stronger now than I was, but I wasn't bad, but I still had small man syndrome. Like I remember training with Justin and Steve Kuklo. Years later I find out they had the heaviest photo shoot ever, is what Flex magazine told them, or was in the magazine or whatever it was, right? And they didn't use the fake weights. Like they were just like, no, we're going to train. And this was like back in the day, right? So I'm not saying it still is, but I remember, and Justin's like, I don't remember that. Like having it, like there was like 645s and they were putting a 7th and I had to put a 25 on. And like wanting to like kill myself, like not kill myself, but I was super depressed. Like I'm a bitch. I'm going to unrack all the weight for these guys now because they've surpassed me. And then I look back, I had the Don Yezbek thing in powerlifting. And then in strongman, I actually ran into a guy who was a national champion that I trained with. All three of them, I'm like, I was depressed in all three sports. But it's because I was with like these superhumans. Somehow just, I was super lucky and just would connect with these people. But anyways, went off on a thing.
I just sent you a picture of when I was naturally see how lean I was. So like I wasn't on anything here.
All right. Fun to reminisce. Let's take a look here.
I don't know how old I was. I was in my 20s probably.
Oh, there's the before and after item. Let me download this. Oh yeah, let me pull this guy up. Here we go.
So I always had a very fast metabolism.
Yeah, I did not. I could put on size and weight really, really easy. Yeah, I ate a lot, but
very lean. Good
I mean,
shape.
I was like 140 or something. I don't know what I weighed, but
yeah, good deep cuts though.
Yeah, you could just tell by like shape there that, meant to have broad shoulders and a small waist.
Yeah, it just took a lot of food and a lot of gear.
Well, that was like Justin, your I probably won't find it in time, but some of your competition photos.
At the very bottom, I have one of like when I first competed. I think I was like 155 pounds, all quads.
Oh, this is the one. Oh, here we go. This is the one you won. I'm going to pull this up really quick and then I'll let everybody go. Let's pull this up. Anyway, listen to audio. Sorry, but there's a bunch of good videos if you're on YouTube.
Nice.
But yeah, I just
awesome.
Peeled, man.
You look great, dude.
Thanks. Yeah, that was 21. Okay.
Awesome, I remember being so jealous of your freaking glutes, man. I was like,
you have a pro card?
No, I'm still trying to go for that.
NBC as well. Okay.
Scroll the way down, Joe. I have right there, that very first one. I actually won the overall at the show. It was a real small show, but I always just had gigantic legs.
Nice.
I was 155 pounds there. I cut down from like 203 pounds because I thought, just bulking is the way to go. I never did that again, but yeah, took some time off in between those shots. It was probably like 8 years in between a competition. Cool. And I competed in May last year. I probably will recompete at some point.
Nice.
You've definitely put on some serious size for sure. Because how long ago were these shots?
That was a couple months ago. For me and my weight cap, I'm hovering right around the edge here. I'm 5'8", so I'm about 200 pounds in these shots. And,
what do you do, 187?
Yeah, 187. I need more arms though. I train my upper body pretty religious and just don't train my legs. My legs just keep growing, man.
Good place to be.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Well, we will end
on
that note. So yeah, thanks again, guys, for jumping on.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Like I said, we'll get some more questions rolling from the group out there, and we're gonna send some emails out and some different posts and stuff. But fun to unpack this. I'm sure we'll have many more. And I actually have a bunch of testing stuff I'm spinning up, so I'll have some testing services out there for people. So it'll be fun to look at some results and compare and contrast and actually get into the weeds a little bit with some of that. So that was cool to get into some of the pathways a little bit today, and looking forward to many more. But any closing thoughts?
I'm thankful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, be sure if you guys haven't. And now is it on your site, Kurt? Is the course, the PED course, on your site, your website?
It's on Paul's. It's on anabolicbodybuilding.com. So Paul Barnett and I recorded similar to J3U, his stuff, but this is purely anabolic stuff. So it's we're constantly adding more. I think there's 99 videos up there right now. It should be the most comprehensive anabolic steroid stuff that's out there.
Yeah, in your HGH ebook, I have to embarrass myself and admit that I have not been able to read through the whole thing because there's just so much great content. But I know you worked on that for a long time.
No, actually, no. I wrote it in 3 weeks.
There's a lot of content.
There's a lot of content. I like to write.
It's great content. That's my point.
I literally sat in those 3 weeks, I probably committed 40 hours a week to writing it.
Right.
And I had 3 computers open at the same time because I was frustrated. I was in school and I was frustrated that there were 500 studies on growth hormone and nothing was compiled and there was no clear info. Doctors didn't understand it. You'd hear the dumbest statements. And then bodybuilders were even just as confused. They'd make up stuff. And I was like, well, there has to be a way to make this make sense. It's not that confusing. So I was like, I'm going to write a book. And then my wife does all my graphic stuff. So she formatted it for me really fast.
Yeah. No, it's awesome.
I only look good because she makes me look good.
There you go. No, it's a great book. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of educators in the industry have read it. Like I know John Jewett gave you like a 5-star review and talked about it too. And I know there's a lot of other people that really like it. So definitely just want to put that out there for people. Shameless plug because he won't do it, but
I think it should be readable for most people, right? It's so high level. I tried to make it like you can't really dumb it down too much because you lose it, but it's readable, I think, for most people.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great book, and there's a lot, like there's just so many layers to it, and like I said, everything you can tell you're really leaning on the science, not some people kind of go off on tangents a little much and talk about opinions and such, and it's hard to tell the difference, but I didn't find that in a lot of what I was looking at with your
I'm taught that way. I've been taught that way in school. I'm not allowed to have an opinion about things. If I can't prove it, I can't say it.
Right.
And I try to stick with that. That's kind of my purpose here, I think, is to just clear up a lot of garbage if I can. But I don't know the answer to everything. Like all the stuff that Justin was talking about, I never learned that stuff. Right. There's huge gaps in the knowledge for all this hormone stuff.
We're all learning.
That's the beauty of
it. We'll keep sharing and chatting and putting out some good stuff. So, well, thanks guys. Thanks everybody for tuning in. All the good stuff, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll have many more episodes and content coming out soon. So we'll see you.
Have a good night.